Dr. Nathan, will you respond first to the argument relative to violence and then to the argument pertaining to mental health?
Sure. It's pretty clear that that what Alex is saying is simply not supported by science. There is not the correlation between cannabis and violence, and in fact, some studies actually show the opposite.
Yuck. No, thank you, Todd. All right. Our next guest made a lot of news this week for his new book detailing the harmful effects of marijuana, but he's drawn a lot of heat, too, with critics saying things like this. Tell your children that Alex Berenson is full of it. Alex Berenson is a little too eager to prove that weed makes people crazy. And new book resurrects long disproven myths about marijuana.
But is that all just a bunch of smoke? Here to respond, Alex Berenson, former New York Times reporter and author of the new book, Tell Your Children the Truth About Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence. Alex, I want you to respond to those attacks, but first, just quickly, why did you write the book and what did you find?
Well, I wrote the book because I want parents and kids to be able to have an informed conversation about this. This drug is being presented as medicine and harmless and natural by a lot of people who have a financial interest in selling it, and by drug policy organizations that want a full national legalization. That's just not true. The science does not support that. The science shows that there's a lot of potential harms with cannabis, especially if you start smoking as a teenager, especially if you use heavily. The people who are, and I want parents to know that, and I want teenagers and young adults to know that, because use is rising.
Right. So here's what filtermag.org wrote about, and I want to get your reaction after. Critics have questioned why the author chose to use data from 2014 as the baseline for changes in homicide rates, even though Oregon saw both weed legalization and a homicide uptick. In 2014, the state's homicide rate drastically dropped between 2016 to 2017.
So I did this in the simplest, most intellectually honest possible way. 2013 was the last year before recreational legalization in Colorado and Washington, which are the two biggest states. Then there's Oregon and Alaska. Put them all together. Look at murders and aggravated assaults in 2013. Look at murders and aggravated assaults in 2017, which is the most recent data that we have. See if all four states have gone up, gone down, gone sideways. It turns out that murders and aggravated assaults have gone up substantially more than the national average.
And that's significant because the legalization crowd, which is very powerful, has promised that these kinds of things would go down.
That's right. The idea was you're going to end the black market, which turns out not to be true at all, and you're going to give police a chance to focus on things other than pot smokers.
Right.
But it turns out that for whatever reason, and we need to figure out why, but in some cases there's a clear connection to cannabis use, that these crimes are rising right now.
Alex, let me show you this from Reason.com. It says, Berenson quotes a 2017 report from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Cannabis use is likely to increase the risk of schizophrenia and other psychoses. The higher the use, the greater the risk. It overstates what NASEM's research review found. Your reaction?
Well, I'm not sure how it overstates it. That's what they found. It's in black and white. It is the first finding in Chapter 12 of their 500-page report, which they took a year to put together, on the health effects of cannabis and cannabinoids. Now, I didn't make it up. It's in there. It is the first sentence in the chapter on cannabis and mental health. So you can judge for yourself. Did I overstate that? I said what they said.
Okay, well, I was going to say your critics say that you're a prohibitionist. So what would you say to that?
I'm not a prohibitionist. 40 million people used cannabis in 2017 in the United States. We're not going to put them all in jail. I think full national legalization is a mistake. It creates a community of a business community that's going to promote use of this drug. I think we can get to a compromise of decriminalization where if you're using or possessing cannabis, you're not going to go to jail. Mostly that's true now, but we can explicitly say it nationally. That would be fine. But prohibitionist is a meaningless term.
So, Alex, what is your message? Both Rachel and I have kids that are of the pot smoking age. What's your message to those youngsters?
The most important thing you can do is delay. delay. If you're going to use this stuff, you probably do not use it until you're in your 20s when your brain has matured more fully. And don't fall for the myth that it's less dangerous than alcohol. It's less dangerous in some ways than alcohol. It's more dangerous in other ways than alcohol. It's more neurotoxic than alcohol.
Well, this is the book, and these are the arguments. So if you're going to have conversations with your kids, and you should be, arm yourself with some information. Thank you.
Thanks.
Alex, thanks very much.
Thanks.
All right.
America seems on the verge of accepting legal marijuana as a nation, not just medicinal, but recreational as well. But are advocates ignoring dark truths about the drug? That's the thesis of a brand new book, Tell Your Children: The Truth About Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence, by former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson. Berenson claims that extensive teenage use of today's much more powerful and available pot is leading to psychosis and violence. Alex Berenson joins me now, along with Dr. David Nathan. He's the board president of Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, a psychiatrist specializing in psychotic disorders. Alex Berenson, for those who've not yet read the book, I have. What's the goal? Are you all about zero tolerance or building awareness?
Oh no, I'm not about zero tolerance. There's no way we're going to put 40 million people in jail or prison for using marijuana. We need people to know the risks here, and we need to come up with a scheme for regulation and probably decriminalization. I don't favor full legalization, but decriminalization, where users are going to get the information they need, and they're going to get help if they need help. But most of all, we need to make sure they know the risks about this drug, that most of the medical claims around it are not proven and not supported by much scientific evidence, and that this can be an addictive drug, that it is a potent drug, that it is linked to psychosis. That's what I want. And that's why I wrote the book.
The idea that it leads to violence seems so counterintuitive. Do you not buy into the stoner stereotype?
Obviously, there are plenty of people who can use marijuana and not become violent. But psychosis is a known risk for violence, and cannabis use is a known risk for psychosis. And, you know, it's funny, with alcohol, we have people out there who drink a lot, and some of them get violent. Some of them sit at home on their couches and drink scotch until they fall asleep. We know both those things are true. They can both be true for marijuana, and the evidence suggests, the hard scientific evidence suggests that those both are true, but we've sort of forgotten that.
One more question for you, and then I'll let Dr. Nathan respond. Relative to mental illness, is the argument that smoking pot causes mental illness, or that it exacerbates those traits and characteristics of folks who are already afflicted?
So it certainly can cause temporary psychotic episodes. It can cause paranoia, it can cause panic attacks, it can cause temporary psychotic episodes. I think the evidence is quite strong, and the National Academy of Medicine report from 2017 said cannabis use raises the risk of developing schizophrenia. The higher the use, the higher the risk. That, to me, is very clear language. There are people on the advocacy side, and I suspect Dr. Nathan may be one of them, who say that hasn't been proven yet. I think it has been proven enough that it is something we need to warn people about.
Dr. Nathan, will you respond first to the argument relative to violence and then to the argument pertaining to mental health?
Sure. It's pretty clear that what Alex is saying is simply not supported by science. There is not the correlation between cannabis and violence, and in fact, some studies actually show the opposite. Can you find studies that show that there is some linkage? Yes. But you can also find studies that show no effect, and just recently there was a study showing that the rates of violence among couples, domestic violence, is decreased among cannabis-using couples.
And on the issue of mental health, what connection, if any, do you believe exists between smoking pot and psychosis or schizophrenia?
Sure. You know, the claim that advocates have been either suppressing or denying what's going on with cannabis and its effect on mental health is simply untrue. First of all, I wrote an article in 2013 about the possible relationship between the triggering of psychosis and the exacerbation of psychosis among cannabis users that are predisposed to psychosis, and perhaps, Alex, you should have read that, because in your book you're saying that not only is this not true, but that somehow we are hiding this fact. And the bottom line is that we know that the arrow goes in the opposite direction, that people who are predisposed to mental illness will self-medicate with cannabis. And that's also true among people with psychosis. Now, as far as educating the public about the real risks of psychosis, I agree that it's important to acknowledge the degree to which people who are predisposed to psychosis should not be using cannabis recreationally, certainly not outside of a doctor's supervision. But I would say that this book that you've written that is really one-sided, and as you say in your opening chapter, that it is not intended to be balanced. Well, that's a real disservice to the public that needs to know what the real risks and the real health effects of cannabis are. And this whole thing actually just sidesteps the question of the social justice costs and public health costs of the prohibition itself.
So
Alex Berenson, go ahead.
You'll note that Dr. Nathan didn't say that he doesn't believe that cannabis causes psychosis. Certainly, that it doesn't cause temporary psychosis. Because he knows. He's a physician. He's a psychiatrist. He knows the truth about this. He said that he has discussed this openly, and that's great. I'm glad to hear that. As for the violence issue, I have more than a dozen studies in the book with rate ratios, meaning that show an actual increase in violence in cannabis users. There's devastating data around child fatalities and child near fatalities showing that a huge percentage of the people, this is from multiple states, who are involved in the death or the near death of a child in their care are using cannabis at the time. There's a lot of data here that has been piling up sort of quietly for the last 5 or 10 years. And I think advocates are going to need to grapple with this, that this is real. This does not mean that we're going to put millions of people in jail for cannabis use, but we need to understand that this drug is not risk-free. It's not the panacea that it's being sold as by both the advocacy community and the for-profit dispensary and grower community.
Look, Alex Berenson, Dr. David Nathan, thank you. It's a great conversation that I feel is just getting started. Appreciate your both being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Want to know what you think? Go to my website at smerconish.com. Answer this question. What's your view? Do you believe that marijuana is dangerous to the brain and can ultimately cause violence? Time to see how you responded to the survey at smerconish.com. Here's the question. Do you believe that marijuana is dangerous to the brain and can ultimately cause violence? Survey said 10,937 votes. 78%, pretty decisive, say no, they don't agree. Quickly, Catherine, what do we have? Smerconish, I've been smoking pot all my life and it hasn't affected me. Wait, what was the question? Right, but you're not violent, are you, Dennis? One more quickly.
Hi everyone, my name's Mike. I'm the creator of Mox News. And for the last 15 years, I have been telling you that as long as I have the support of the community that I serve, Mox News will post videos forever. And that's the truth. As long as I have your support, no one could ever make me stop. Unfortunately, currently, less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% of Mox News viewers ever donate, tip, or contribute anything back. Again, let me make that really clear. Much less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% ever give anything back. And to those of you who have donated to Mox News, I want to thank you so much, because it's because of your generosity that we have been able to bring attention to important videos that millions and millions of eyes would have never seen. And I think that that's an amazing thing that we've been able to make happen together. And I can't thank you enough for helping me make that happen. So it's not too late. If you'd like to see Mox News covering the 2020 presidential election, if you can't imagine the 2020 presidential election without Mox News, please, there's still time. You can make a difference. It's easy to make a contribution, donation, or tip. You can go to moxnews.com, or in the text body of this video, there are clickable links to the Patreon page or to the PayPal page. And Again, it should take less than 2 minutes to make a donation, and your donation can make a big difference. So I thank you all. Stay cool. One of these days this war is going to end, and it would be awesome if Mox News could be there to celebrate that day with you.